Hello everybody, my name is Jamex de la Torre.
And I'm Einar de la Torre, also known as the De la Torre Brothers. And here we are at the McNay opening for the Upward Mobility exhibition at the Tobin Gallery.
The first section of our exhibition at the McNay Museum is sort of like a museum setup traditionally with pedestal pieces and wall pieces. And here we're exploring themes of kind of a strange or dark nature.
We have a set of figures that relate directly into the work at the lobby, which we called Latin exoskeleton, which are luchadores made out of nopales. So we decided to also make some out of glass. So here we have a luchador that is a nopalero as well, even with flowers growing, but he's a tough guy. He's got the, maybe he's a rudo more than a técnico, if you know your luchador terminology. So he's a survivor.
And the piece is fabricated with blown glass techniques. Basically, this is one bubble that was cut to make the legs. The head was added later, and the base was added later, as well as the other pieces, which are called bits in glass blowing terminology. The base is a resin casting. It's a pretty large resin casting with some plastic lemons inside.
And next to him is the Lorax, Lorax Dos. So this is the sort of, when we did a project up in Poland, we realized that there was the Northern Crusades, and we started to relate some of the Northern Crusades to getting the pagans out of the woods and into villages, and of course get them religion, because that's one thing the pagans did. They had their own sort of way with nature. So this is the Lorax is very upset that we are, getting rid of forests and jungles, and he's pretty grumpy, giving us kind of a, to humanity for not being good stewards of the nature.
And from Northern European Slavic mythology, we have been working with the idea of the Vodianoi, which is kind of a creature of the lagoon that's basically a very old man with algae growing all over his body and the head of a frog. And this fellow either saves you or drowns you when you're in the ponds and waterways. So when people in the north go fishing, they sometimes throw a little vodka to appease him, a little vodka in the pond. And apparently he likes to collect pots.
So this piece is called Charmer. It's sort of like, because he obviously has a snake, and it's a little bit about snake handling, but as a metaphor. He's a psychopump, and psychopumps are the sort of, many cultures have this sort of deity that takes you to the next life. And in between, an emissary, you might say, between our terrestrial world and the great beyond.
So Einar frequents a swap meet in South San Diego, where there's a lot of he occasionally finds Filipino religious items, and in this case, it was a statue of a little angel. And in our studio, we performed a head transplant. So the blown glass head on top is added to this figure that used to be a little angel.
I'll describe a little bit of what lenticular is. So lenticular is basically two heavily layered images, layered in terms of like Photoshop layers. And the images are cut into thin little lines, and there's a lens put in front of that allows you to see, like prisms, the image through the lens. You see one, and as you move laterally, it jumps to the other line of information. That's why you're seeing two different images. It's actually one print. If you take the lens off, you would only see a bunch of lines. And so what's happening with it is that it creates a fake space, meaning that your eyes are focusing above and below the substrate, so you think you're looking at something that has depth. Also, another thing that happens is spatially, things move around a little bit and appear behind other things, and your mind creates an architecture as if though it was very deep in there. And again, you have to move laterally to get the effect. Imagery-wise, we have the sort of megalomaniac from Turkmenistan, huge sculpture of gold, and he is overseeing this sort of war scene that is in the middle of this bull ring. And if you shift sideways, you'll see Vodyanov, which is the frog guy, and then you see the Sufi spinning, and there's peace. So there's the eternal battle between the sort of war and evil and dictatorship, and then maybe there's a more benevolent view of with the Sufi spinning and a more spiritual higher ground.
This piece is titled Michicano Corazon. It's a pretty large blown glass piece. If you think that at one point the whole thing was at the end of a pipe and we had to move it around, holding it, not getting too close because it's quite hot when you're working. And all these leaves were added hot in one shot. So it was quite a long process with a team of 5 people to produce this piece.
And it's all mounted in this is a wire wheel from a lowrider car. If you look inside, you'll see the wire wheel in there. So it is our homage to Chicano as an identity. In 2017, we did an installation in a Kunstfort, an art, old fort in the Netherlands that they do art shows for a few months, I think the summer months, because otherwise it's inhabited by bats that are protected. So they do exhibitions there for those. And we were there doing a part of an exhibition called Complexities that had work from Italian glassblowers, Czech glassblowers, and Dutch ones. And in one of the spaces they gave us, we decided to do a table, sort of a feast that had just happened, almost like a table of the rich, we called it, in order to give it an other explanation. This is the sort of the largest one we have made in that vein, having to do with this sort of opulence and maybe overconsumption. But at the same time, you're thinking, boy, I kind of wish I had been invited. So you're both disgusted by it, but at the same time, wish that you were invited to parties of this magnitude. So there's like a palimpsest of what just happened. There's the traces, the open bottles, the little bit of wine left in the cups.
So whenever in history you have very extreme accumulations of wealth in the hands of a few, you also have discontent and resentment in the poorer sectors. And it's manifested by what you can see reflected from under the table. And this chandelier up here with the arms with the broken bottles is starting to express a sort of rebelliousness. And in a sense, in our artwork, we tried to go from obvious judgmentalism, but it is something that has happened in history many times and is apparently happening now again. There's a great accumulation going on right now. We're about to have our first trillionaire out there in the next 10 years. So it's just what it is, it's happening.
Something else that I think our work does an awful lot is that we use humor. And I think that our use of humor has to do with lightening the mood a little bit because, we can talk about heavy subjects, but we have to lighten it up a little bit in order to access and to allow a discussion. And it's better than being judgmental or somehow getting preachy on any matter, because after all, we can talk about how bad overconsumption is, but we drove here and we flew here and we have our cell phones, so we are all guilty. We're not above it by any means.
And humor is absolutely necessary to deal with the absurdities of existence. Yeah.
For instance, this fellow right here is a bottle of beer. We made him in Belgium, and he's drinking a bottle of beer. So that makes him a cannibal. And that's the name of this beer. The other side, you could see there's his face. And when we made the face, we were very much thinking about the Flemish master painters that were kind of famously started depicting everyday scenes in Netherlands, as opposed to just religious paintings. And also it's speaking a little bit about alcoholism and how many families have been touched by all of that.
And there's the richness and decadence. He's toasting the whole table. He's heading the table.
So there's a lot of vignettes or little scenes here, all the way up to including Charmer that we had in the other room and spoke about. This is the head of that figure that now is part of the table setting.
Of course, the table of the rich has to have a capitalist pig. We have two.
Yep,
We have one on the other side.
This one is offering you a piece of cake, which is totally a Marie Antoinette moment of letting them eat cake.
And the central figure here is a fly man, sort of like the movie The Fly, morphing of a human and a fly, enjoying his riches and with a sash, basically symbolizing a government post of control.
And the candles are basically doll parts, so it's the consumption of labor, basically using labor to make your wealth.
And most plates display this little Cupid doll that we casted in resin over and over again. We wanted it to be sort of like a Jello casting, like a fun color, almost like a dessert. But of course, it's a baby, and the whole theme of the table is that it's a sort of cannibalism. We, the most powerful country in the world, do cannibalize the poor countries, and we are cannibalizing the environment too, as well, for our riches.
There's always a sacrifice to be made. This is how museums got started. Basically, you had people of means traveling around the world and accumulating artifacts. The Albert and Victoria Museum in London being a glaring example of this. I think it's, there were basically cabinet of curiosities. I picked this up when I was in Egypt, I picked this up when I was in Greece, kind of thing. That's where the museum was born, out of this. So in some ways we are both enchanted by it, but there's also an appropriation there that happens, that now a lot of these things are being asked to be given back, and all the complications of owning things that are from other cultures. So another part of the sort of cabinet of curiosities or that we have going here is to actually be using furniture that was part of the McNay collection. And so these are examples that Ms. McNay was living with, and so it's a great part of the history of the museum itself. Very relevant to the way that we are doing this installation, because it is about collecting, and it's about, eventually becoming a museum, which is exactly what happened in this case.
We decided to dedicate the exhibition to Tomás Ibarra Frausto, a trailblazing scholar of Chicano art and Chicano studies, native to San Antonio. He actually literally started his career at the McNay art school. And it was from there that he became intrigued and started his illustrious career.
And that's what museums like this can do, is to foster that kind of interest that can lead to a wonderful lifetime achievement of being a major protagonist in issues having to do with Mexican American, Chicanos, and indeed everything to do with the border studies. And Tomás is really a pioneer in that, including coining the term rascuache, which we rather relate to rather well in some of our work. But we wanted to show taxidermy in our exhibition because of the way that we are sort of looking at something that we have already sort of taken from nature, and how at some point that's all we have left is these stuffed animals, and the responsibility that we have for not stopping our consumerism that brings us to watching a mass extinction of species around the world.
So they are like the epitome of consumerism of nature. But at the same time, they also speak of a time where it was very widely accepted to do this, and the animals are displayed with a lot of grace and elegance. So it does speak of a respect and love for the animal, even though it's an obvious strange dichotomy that you would kill the animal first, and then you would have this reverence later.
So this room is a kind of movie posters. We have the poster of Quadzilla, which is Coatlicue, the great Aztec goddess, sort of a mother in nature kind of effigy. that's very grumpy because we haven't been good to nature. So she's destroying Mexico City, and this is the poster for her movie. She's the protagonist, and her nemesis in the background that's gaining on her is Mictlantecutli, that has been morphed with Vladimir Putin. So we call him Mictlanteputin. And so this is her movie, and it's a monster movie, obviously, and he's gaining on her in one of the versions as you move sideways. The video that we're standing on is a video of an intersection in Reforma in Mexico City, which is literally where all these monsters are having their little melee. So the idea with this is that we are the monsters, we are crushing the cars, we are relating to the monsters as monsters ourselves. And over here we have the poster for Mictlanteputin's movie poster. He's not destroying. What he's doing is he's creating more petroleum and more highways. Out of his tribes come more freeways and highways because he wants more consumption of oil, more cars, the internal combustion engine. And in fact, one of the versions that you see in the background will be of where Quadzilla turns into like a refinery, which of course is what's keeping the war machine alive in Russia, war with Ukraine.
So it's a commentary on the human condition of being in between these two giant monsters, nature with COVID and all sorts of diseases, and progress and technology. The two big monsters, sort of like a B-movie from the 1960s, monsters walking all over the cities, and then you find yourself being the monster, also walking and finding yourself also with your own taste for destruction, just like a Godzilla would. And lastly, we have our installation, Colonial Atmosphere. It's an installation we built 2005 or so?
Or
2002. So it's the oldest piece in this collection of pieces in the museum. And it survived a lot of renditions.
It was originally in an exhibition called Mixed Feelings at USC in Southern California in LA, Fisher Museum. And it had there was some luminaries like Marcos Ramirez, Mark Bradford, Amalia Mesa Baines, amongst others that were part of the exhibition. We have since shown it maybe in 6 other venues. And it is an Olmec head as the Apollo landing, the lunar lander from the late 60s and early 70s. As a nod to global warming, we now have the lander is basically a way of the humans escaping Earth because it's burning up. Literal global warming happening there. And now we have the colonization of the moon with some saguaro cactuses, and I think there's a little taco stand in the corner, kind of like saying, well, you know, we have arrived.
And for the astronaut exploring the moon, we have the goddess Coatlicue, which means serpent skirt. That's what she has, a skirt of serpents. And she is quite a bulky statue, so he became a natural astronaut.
So all of the volumes that you see made out of sheet glass and stuck together, much like an aquarium, are very much based on the Apollo lunar landers, including this is where the ladder would come out to have the first steps on the moon and all of that. We have here a Mayan image of the Mayan deity Pacal from Palenque. In the Isthmus of Mexico.
The so-called Mayan astronaut.
So he's supposed to be in a position as if though he was driving the lunar, the lander. And inside of this, if we peek inside through some of these windows, you will see sort of the baby Jesus that's also been feathered. So he is both the baby Jesus but Quetzalcoatl, mixing the two, the true mestizaje of cultures.
The two savior myths.
And he's driving and also watching the monitors, which feature a film that has been spliced from a movie in Nahuatl, some PBS documentary on the lunar landers, and George Bush in the background talking, which that was the president at the time. So it has a lot to do when it was made. If you look inside the bottom, we have 5 shamans dancing around a campfire, and that campfire is the motor that's taking over, that makes the unit land and take off of the moon. So that's how it's powered. This installation in the lobby, the AT&T lobby, is called Latin Exoskeleton. It has to do with looking at the Latinx as a sort of armor of protection. They are casta paintings, the 5 lenticulars, and the casta paintings that were done to sort of explain the mixtures of the races, a very complicated discourse, of course. We kind of wanted to have fun with it, a little tongue-in-cheek, and have the progeny all of them be little luchadores made out of nopal cactus. Kind of like saying that to be a mixture is to make you stronger, and you have a stronger exoskeleton, which is the spines on the cactus.
The casta paintings were popular in colonial Latin America, South America, and Mexico, and they depicted the different racial mixes, because to the Europeans that was a completely new state of humanity. It didn't exist before, so there was a fascination for that. But the paintings themselves, the farther down you go and the darker you are, the more derogatory they're termed. So there's, of course, racism implied. And in our piece, all the products of all the mixes are nopaleros. They're made out of nopales, prickly pear cactus as a universal identity unifier.
And so we installed this last September as a precursor to the exhibition Upward Mobility that is about to open. We hope you come.